Nobody told me. That's the part that still sits with me all these years later. Not one person, not my doctor, not my father, not a single man I worked alongside for over 4 decades. Nobody sat me down and said, "Wart, here's what's coming. Here's what happens to your body after 65, whether you wanted to or not." My name is Walter. I'm 82 years old, and I'm sitting here this morning in the same kitchen I've sat in for going on 50 years, and I want to tell you something I had to learn the hard way. What I'm about to share isn't what the doctors talk about in their 15-minute appointments. It isn't in any pamphlet they hand you on the way out. It's the stuff that actually happens, to every single one of us. And the difference between the men who navigate it with some dignity and the ones who get swallowed by it whole is simply whether or not they knew it was coming. So, let me tell you what I know. The first thing that happened, and this one hit me before I even understood what I was dealing with, was the sleep. I was 67. I'd retired that spring, and I thought, finally, I get to rest properly. 40-some years of shift work, of alarm clocks and lunch pails, and coming home so tired I'd fall asleep in the chair before dinner. And now I was going to sleep when I wanted to, and wake when I wanted to. That was the plan. What actually happened was I'd go to bed at 9, wake up at midnight, lie there until 2, doze off, wake again at 4:15, and then just be done. Wide open eyes at 4:15 in the morning, every morning, staring at the ceiling while the house made its noises. I thought something was wrong with me. I tried everything. Went to bed later. That just meant I was exhausted and awake at 4. Tried a glass of warm milk the way my mother used to recommend, which, I'll tell you, if warm milk cured anything, we'd have solved insomnia in 1953. I even bought one of those sound machines that plays ocean waves. I live 1,000 miles from any ocean. Every time it kicked on, it just reminded me of a vacation I never took. What I didn't know, what nobody told me, is that after 65, the brain quite literally changes the way it sleeps. The deep, restorative sleep that you spent your whole life taking for granted, that long, dark, unbroken stretch where your body actually repairs itself, it starts to compress, shrink. Your brain produces less of the hormone that pulls you into sleep. Your internal clock shifts forward by hours. You become someone who is genuinely ready for bed at 8 in the evening and genuinely finished with sleep by 4 in the morning. And the entire world is structured around people who are not you. I fought it for almost 2 years. Then one evening, it was November, I remember, because the frost had come early that year, and I was watching the last of the leaves come down off the maple in the backyard. I just stopped fighting it. I went to bed when I was tired, which was 7:30. I woke at 3. And instead of lying there furious at myself, I got up, made coffee, sat at this same table, and watched the dark outside the window turn slowly gray. There was something in that. I'm not sure I can explain it. The house quiet in a way it never was when Linda was here. She was always up before me, always had something already going on the stove. But quiet in a way I found I could sit inside without it pressing too hard. I stopped treating 4 in the morning like a failure. The second thing, and this is one that can genuinely put a man in the hospital, which is why I want you to understand it clearly, is what happens to your body's ability to regulate temperature. I was 71. I remember the year because it was the summer after my youngest daughter, Rachel, finally moved her family out west, and the house had just gotten quieter in that particular way it does when a regular presence stops appearing. It was a July afternoon, not even that hot by the almanac's measure, maybe 82 degrees. I was out back doing some work on the fence line, nothing strenuous, just tightening posts and replacing a few boards. An hour, maybe 90 minutes. I came inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and realized I felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately name. Not dizzy exactly, not sick, just wrong. like the signal between my body and my brain had some interference in it. I drank some water, sat very still. The feeling passed. I didn't think about it again for 2 weeks until it happened again, this time at the hardware store, standing in an aisle that couldn't have been warmer than 68 degrees. I mentioned it to my doctor. He tested my blood pressure, checked my heart, found nothing obvious, and sent me home. What he didn't explain, and what I eventually pieced together from a book my daughter Karen sent me, which I'll confess I read mostly out of stubbornness and partly out of fear, is that after 65, the part of your brain that monitors body temperature begins losing the cells that do that work. You can be too hot and not feel it. You can be dangerously cold and not feel it. The sweat mechanisms that cooled you down for 60-some years become unreliable. The fat layer under your skin that insulated you for 60-some years thins out. The blood vessels that used to rush warmth or coolness to where it was needed stop responding as quickly. Your body keeps a lot of secrets from you now. The man who used to work in any weather, layered up or stripped down as the day required, trusting his body to signal what it needed, that man's signals have become unreliable, and he may be the last one to know it. I put a thermometer on the back porch. I check it before I go outside now. Not because I couldn't handle it differently, just because, and this took me longer to accept than it should have, trusting a number on a dial is sometimes wiser than trusting a feeling in your bones. That's not weakness. That's just being honest with yourself. Thomas next door does something similar, I've noticed. He checks the temperature in his garage before he lets Lucas spend time out there with him in winter. He doesn't make a ceremony of it. He just looks at the thermometer, adjusts, and gets on with things. There's a practical intelligence in that I've come to respect. The third thing is what happens to digestion, and I'll tell you this one surprised me more than any of the others because I assumed I knew my own stomach. I'd eaten the same breakfast for 35 years, 2 eggs, toast, coffee. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that ever caused me a moment's trouble. Then, somewhere around 68, 69, the egg started feeling heavy in a way I couldn't account for. The coffee sat differently. I'd stand up from the table and feel a slow, uncomfortable fullness that wouldn't lift until mid-morning. I tried different coffees. I tried a different pan. I tried eating later, eating earlier, not eating at all, which my daughter Karen called me about when she found out because apparently Rachel tells Karen everything and Karen tells me. The truth, and here is where I'll tell you the thing nobody mentions in polite conversation, is that the entire digestive process slows down after 65 in ways that are measurable and real and not a matter of attitude. The stomach produces less acid. The muscular contractions that move food through your system become slower, less coordinated. The small intestine absorbs nutrients less efficiently. The large intestine, which once moved things along in 40 hours, may now take 3 or 4 times that long. This isn't a character flaw. It's biology. What helped me, and I want to be careful here because I'm not any kind of doctor and I'm certainly not in a position to tell you what to do with your own body, but what helped me was simply eating less at a time and more often. 3 big meals had been the rhythm of my working life. Breakfast before the shift, lunch when the horn blew, dinner at 6. That structure made sense when my body was processing food at one speed. At 70, it needed a different rhythm. I also chew my food more thoroughly now, which my father would have called pathetic, and which I choose to call adaptive. The eggs are fine, by the way. I just eat 1 instead of 2. This is going to sound ridiculous, and I realize that, but I want to tell you about the glasses. For about 6 months, around age 70, I was misplacing my reading glasses so consistently that I started to genuinely wonder if I was losing something more serious than the glasses themselves. I'd look all over the house, check every room, retrace every step. 45 minutes of a perfectly good morning, gone. And then my daughter, I believe it was Laura who notices things others don't, pointed out very calmly, very deliberately, that the glasses were on my face. 3 times she told me this. 3 different occasions. Now I keep them on a cord around my neck like some kind of elderly librarian, and I have never once lost them since. Progress. The fourth thing, and this one I want you to sit with because it's the one that most directly determines whether a man of a certain age stays in his own home or moves somewhere else, is balance. I was 73. There was ice on the back steps, a thin layer I didn't see until my right foot went out from under me, and I caught myself on the railing. Barely. My hand was already there. The railing held. I stood there for a moment in the cold, heart going, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Afraid. Not of the ice. Of what it meant that I almost didn't catch myself. The inner ear, the system that tells your body where it is in space, loses a significant portion of its sensory cells as you age. The sensors in your muscles and joints that register position and movement without you consciously thinking about it, those become less sensitive. Your vision loses some of its depth and contrast, and the processing speed, the rate at which your brain receives all that information and coordinates a response, slows down considerably. This isn't a catastrophic event. It happens gradually, quietly, until you're standing on a back step with ice under your boot, and you realize the system that caught you 1,000 times before is working with less margin than it used to. I had grab bars installed that winter. I didn't ask anyone's opinion about it. I just called a man and had it done. In the bathroom, along the hallway, in the 2 places where the floor transitions from one surface to another. My oldest son Daniel came to visit that spring and saw them and didn't say anything, which I appreciated. I also started doing something I would have laughed at 10 years ago. Every morning, while my coffee brews, I stand on one foot. 30 seconds on the left, 30 seconds on the right. That's it. Some mornings I'm steady, some mornings I'm not. But I keep track of the difference, and the difference matters. A man told me once, someone I worked with for years, older than me, who seemed to move through the later years with an ease I couldn't entirely account for. He said the only real difference between the men who stayed on their feet and the men who didn't was that the ones who stayed on their feet treated their balance like it needed daily attention, like a machine you have to run to keep it running. I think about him when I'm standing there in the kitchen on one foot, coffee maker grumbling, the maple just starting to come back in the yard. The fifth thing, and this is the one that carries the most weight, the one that is the engine behind everything else, is muscle. After 65, the body begins losing muscle mass at a rate that accelerates as you go. It's not a gradual, manageable decline. It's a process that picks up speed. The muscle fibers responsible for quick, powerful movements, the ones that catch you when you trip, that lift you from a low chair, that carry a bag of groceries from the car. Those go faster than the others. And the body, in its strange logic, begins to resist building them back. I noticed it first in my hands. I'd always had strong hands. 40 years of manufacturing, you develop a grip that becomes almost automatic. Then one winter I couldn't open a particular jar, a jar of peanut butter of all things, and I sat there for a full minute working at it before I set it down on the counter and just looked at it. That jar sat on the counter for 2 days. I made other things for lunch. When I finally mentioned it to my doctor, the hands, not the jar. I didn't tell him about the jar. He said something that I've thought about many times since. He said that protein is the building material, and that most men my age are eating nowhere near enough of it, because nobody told them the requirement goes up as you age, not down. I'd been eating the way I ate in my 50s, meals that were probably adequate then. Now they weren't. I started eating eggs again at breakfast, one of them, as I mentioned, because of the digestion situation, but consistently every morning. I started paying attention to whether there was something substantive with protein at every meal. Not in a rigid, obsessive way, just attending to it. And I started moving, not in the way I moved at 50, which was work, physical labor that built and maintained without my thinking about it. This was deliberate, modest. I walk most mornings, a route that takes about 25 minutes. I do a set of exercises my doctor recommended, which involve sitting down and standing up from a chair a certain number of times, which felt undignified the first week and now just feels like something I do. I won't tell you it reversed anything dramatic. I won't tell you I'm stronger than I was at 68, but I can open most jars now. And I carried a box of books up from the basement last fall without sitting down on the stairs halfway up. That's enough. There's something I've come to understand about all of this that took me a long time to arrive at. Partly because arriving at it required me to give up a story I'd been telling myself since I was 9 years old, standing in the front yard with a scraped knee while my father looked at me and said, "Get up. Nobody's coming to help you out there." I believed that for most of my life. I shaped myself around it. The not asking, the not showing the difficulty. The handling of things alone, in silence, without making noise about it. And there is something in that which served me. I won't pretend otherwise. I got through things I don't know how I would have gotten through otherwise. But here's what I know now that I didn't know then. There's a difference between handling difficulty quietly and pretending the difficulty isn't there. What happens to the body after 65 isn't shameful. It isn't weakness. It isn't evidence of anything you did wrong or failed to maintain or should have done differently. It happens to everyone. The man who spent his life running marathons and the man who spent his life behind a desk. The biology comes for both of them on roughly the same schedule. The question isn't whether it happens. The question is whether you know it's coming and make some room for it. The men I've watched struggle the most in the later years are not the ones with the hardest bodies or the most difficult circumstances. They're the ones who couldn't make the adjustment from the story of who they were to the reality of where they are, who kept expecting their body to respond the way it did at 50 and treated every deviation as a personal failure. I wasted years on that. I'm grateful, though. I want to say that clearly because I don't want to leave you with the wrong impression of where I've landed. I'm grateful for the 82 years. For the ones that were hard, which were most of them, and for the ones that were sweet, which were scattered through like the kind of light that comes through clouds in late afternoon. Unexpected, brief, clarifying. I'm grateful that I eventually learned what my body was doing, even if I learned it imperfectly, even if I learned it late. I'm grateful for this kitchen, for the maple coming back every spring, for the coffee that's still good at 4 in the morning when everything is quiet, for the life that was ordinary and full and mine. There are things I'd do differently. There are conversations I'd have sooner, words I'd say before there was no longer anyone to say them to. But I'm still here, and there's still morning, and that seems to me like enough. If you've been sitting with me through all of this, thank you. It means something, having someone listen. If something here struck you, or if you know someone who might need to hear it, share it with them. And if you want to sit with me again sometime, I'll be here. Take care of yourself, whatever that means to you.